Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to another Sooth Keep live stream. We are, as many of you have already figured out, running quite a bit earlier than normal. We usually run about 8 p.m. Central Time. Today, we're running at 12:30 Central Time. And our guest today is Pete Garcia. Pete, welcome aboard today.
Hey, thanks for having me on, Lee.
Well, today, we're covering a very fascinating subject, which is AI. We're going to talk about the AI juggernaut. What is AI? How is it going to affect the world? What are its positives? What are its negatives? How is this going to be associated with Bible prophecy? Going to be a very fascinating subject. It's been a popular subject, but I think that even though it's been popular for the last year, I think people still, for a large degree, have not caught on what a powerful tool this is going to be for the enemy. I don't have a whole lot of housekeeping today, just asking prayers. Pete and I are both going to be at the Imminent Return Prophecy Conference in Norman, Oklahoma. If any of you folks are going to be in the neighborhood, stop in and say hi to Pete and I and to the other prophecy teachers there. Meet your friends, have a good time, great fellowship. I've got 2 days of journey in front of me, 2 10-hour days of driving. Now, apparently, people can see and hear because I haven't received any notices that things are going south. So let's just jump right into this, Pete. What is AI?
AI is artificial intelligence. It's a system. It's a computer program system that's designed to, in varying stages and levels, to work autonomously, apart from human input or interaction. Obviously, it is requisite of human computer programming, or programming to do whatever you want it to do. You have simple AI, which is like a computer game you play on your phone. If you're playing against the computer, you're playing like a chess game or checkers or something like that, or a card game. You're playing against that computer. That's a simple AI. You got a step above that where you get some interactive type feedback with AI, and that's like Siri or Alexa. You ask it questions, it can scour the internet and give you a link to whatever it is that you're trying to find, or the closest thing you're trying to find. Or it may be able to even go another step further and make recommendations, or options. If you're trying to decide on what to cook tonight, it'll start listing out all different kinds of menus. And so people are fascinated by this. But we've seen this kind of I started writing about AI back in about 2012 or so, and I know others have too. Chuck Missler, Britt Gillette, and others have long been concerned about the advancements in AI. But at the time, I was knee deep in the military, and our commander at the time, our brigade commander, was a physics instructor. Had been a physics instructor, so he was always asking us technology questions. And the one thing that he posed to us, what's the biggest threat? And I said at the time, I said AI was. And he said, well, AI can't get to where it needs to get to until quantum technology, the computing processing power of quantum technology, gets to that stage. And for me, it's always kind of which came first, the chicken or the egg? Because is it AI that develops and does the data extrapolation and information processing to get to the formulas that require quantum systems to operate on? Or is it the other way around, where we develop the processing power through quantum and then use that to power AI? So it's a conundrum that we're into nowadays. And hopefully my audio is coming through good. I changed rooms just so I can get to a better spot in the house where the Wi-Fi is streaming and flowing better. But the one thing, let me close on this part. Let me just say that AI and quantum technology, from my perspective, are intricately linked together, and they are the new arms race for the 21st century. And leaders, have known about this for a while, but nobody's really said anything publicly about it up until, I think, Putin was the first one to really come out and to say that whoever develops AI first is going to control the world. And so that's sparked this race, this new arms race, And whether these governments are benevolent or nefarious, or even individuals, we're seeing individuals and organizations fast tracking technologies that far exceed our ability to understand them and or regulate them to protect the population at large. And I think that's kind of the frightening part, is that it's the Wild West right now in terms of artificial intelligence and where this is going to end up.
Yeah, and one of the things that's a scary aspect of the whole thing is this is a very complex version of GIGO, garbage in, garbage out. You put in good programming and you have good results. You put in bad programming and you get terrible results. If someone intentionally corrupts information on one of these AI technologies, and it's going to be used in law enforcement, or it's going to be used in banking or financial records, people could get royally, well, just crushed, damaged, destroyed.
Yeah, I mean, and think about look at who is now, talk about motivations. Look at who's now becoming interested in developing their own AI. You have the FBI and the IRS who are actively seeking the power of AI to do all the data processing, to go back in everybody's tax records. They might be able to go back in a matter of seconds to see, it's painful enough to pay your taxes every year and to go through and do your form, whatever, and think back to what you spent, what you made over the year, collect all your receipts, do all this kind of stuff. These systems will be able to process that in a matter of milliseconds, your entire, everything that you've done, and they'll be able to quickly calculate. And this is what I think is coming down the pike, which is the system of the Antichrist is going to be all powerful in this regards. It's going to have this kind of power to know everything and to see everything in terms of surveillance technologies around the world. There's not going to be anywhere to hide when this day comes for that.
Yeah, there's a lot of ugly coming down the pike. That is for sure. Now, I'd like to pull up a couple of interesting charts here. Let me see if I can put these. Oh yeah, here we go. You can see here. Can everyone see my chart? Can you see it, Pete?
Yeah, I can see it.
Oh, okay. That means probably everyone else can see it too. This here, we see the growth of AI, and we're going to use Chat GPT 3, which was built in 2020 as the baseline. And I got this information from Zero Hedge via a friend by the name of Wayne Long. Now, GPT-3 learns 7 septillion 850 sextillion times faster than the AI the government was using in 1950. GPT-3 learns 17 billion, almost 500 million times faster than the AI that was used in 1992. Minerva, which they built in 2022, is learning 8.6 times faster than GPT-3. AIs built in 2025 will likely learn 19 times faster than GPT-3. And in 2030, that's going to be 102 times faster than GPT-3. Now, if I pull up this next slide, this is the logarithmic graph of the growth from 1950 up to our day. And so every line here, you add 3 zeros. So you go from 1,000 to 1,000,000 to 1,000,000,000 to 1,000,000,000,000, quadrillion, quintillion, sextillion, septillion, octillion. Now, this just looks like it's just a slow growth up the curve. But if we put this on the exponential graph, you can see it was almost a straight line from 1950 to 2020. And since then, it is shot up. And this line here is going to continue to skyrocket in the next 10 years.
Yeah, that's like that Buckminster doubling curve where it talks. They talked about how information doubles over time, and you can look at how that growth starts out very slow, like in the times of Jesus, right? From the first AD to say 500 AD, technology is doubling about every 400, 500 years.
Yep.
And then as it gets closer, now we're here in the 20th century, and where we began in, say, the year 1900, technology is doubling every 50 years. By 1940, it's every 25 years. By 1970, it's every 10 years. And now we're at this point where we're doubling by hours and days, or maybe even months, weeks and months, rather than years. And this is that information. This is that exponential growth that is. We looked at this. When I looked at this 10 years ago, uh, I understood about the doubling curve, um, and I understood about how, I can't remember the guy's name, but he was the one that kind of championed about information coming forth and doubling. And
Are you talking about Moore's law and the number of transistors?
yeah,
Yep.
Moore's law for processing power,
Yep.
processing information. And that to me seemed far-fetched for technology, or for that level of information in a particular subject to double within 24 months. It seemed far-fetched back then, and now that seems like, oh, that's way behind. We're looking at every month or every 6 months at the most. So Chat GPT is really become this kind of game changer in regards to what it's going to allow people in certain industries to do. And one of the things too, and I don't mean to hog this all up, but if you think about artificial intelligence, and if you look at the past presidential elections, going even 2020, 2016, 2012, none of them have really addressed an issue that was under the surface this whole time, and that is how AI is going to transform the economy, and it's going to make jobs that used to be human, now they are going to be done by these AI programs. And we used to think about monotonous factory jobs, like you're checking every fifth widget, as it goes down the line, and now you have a robot that can do that, right? Well, now you've got Chat GPT so powerful that it can write legal treaties, and it can write movie scripts, and it can write music. It can produce all sorts of things that used to be in the realm of humans, as far as our intelligence and our creativity. Now these things are quickly being replaced by AI.
I saw an interesting article the other day on the Jerusalem Post about a man who owns and operates an orchard grove as well as being a scientist. And I think he's dealing with oranges. I got a funny echo. Can anyone else hear that funny echo?
I can every once in a while. Yeah.
Yep. So this guy that runs the orange grove has developed an AI technology. He has a wagon that he pulls behind his tractor, and I think there's like 6 or 8 robots on there with long arms. And as he goes through the rows, the sensors sense which oranges are ripe, and then the arms will go out and pick the orange, and then the orange will be dropped into a vacuum hose, and it'll roll into the hopper where it's supposed to go without getting damaged. So it's pretty amazing. It's way faster and way more accurate than human beings.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, there's a lot of nervous actors. And in fact, this actors strike they had out in Hollywood for the last few months for the writers and the actors has been on this one issue about AI. And since Chat GPT has come out, and you put in a prompt, so let's say you want to write a movie about a werewolf or Frankenstein done in Shakespearean speech, and you want it to be set in the 16th century Spanish villa, fighting Don Quixote or something, and you can have that script, say it's a 30-page script or a 100-page script, in a matter of seconds. And the thing is,
Crazy.
like, not only is it like grammar, in terms of grammar and all that, accurate, like you don't need to check it for grammar and things. It's going to be a compelling story. It is the craziest thing I've ever seen. So in terms of AI,
it's interesting how these things are going through millions of storylines, fiction books, screenwriting scripts, going through millions of them and taking the themes that are similar to what you want and just randomly picking and mixing details to make a unique story. Pretty crazy.
Yeah. No, the applications, even with art, I like to use Midjourney because for me, a few years ago, copyright issues started to become a really hot topic, and I got really kind of paranoid about using anybody else's art because I thought, well, one day they could come back and try and sue me or do whatever. And so I just said, well, I need to make my own art. And the only decent art I found online for eschatology and Bible prophecy and that stuff was like what the Mormons had. The Mormons, they had all like the cool, like 1950s people dressed in suit and ties, and they're all kind of like they're going to church on Sunday and they're seeing Jesus in the sky and all that kind of stuff. Well, I thought, well, why do they have all the cool art when it comes to Bible prophecy? So I started, that's kind of where I began in mine. And you're right, you can mix and match styles. You can do any kind of you can do a watercolor, background with a MC Escher kind of style of structures with a Van Gogh sky in the background. Like it'll do all that. It's insane.
Yeah, I've started using Midjourney myself, and I found it very fascinating. But the learning curve for actually learning the proper syntax to make it do what you want it to do, that's been pretty steep.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it is a lot of missing hits and misses.
Yep. I've had times where I put in a command like 4 men riding horses, and I get 6 ladies riding a mixture of animals, including giraffes. It's like, what? How did that happen? But
yeah.
But once they get those kind of bugs ironed out, Midjourney for a while was struggling with hands having 6, 7, 8 fingers. They're getting much better at that. It's not completely removed, but this is just a matter of tweaking the computer program basically in the algorithm so that it's going to be much better at sifting out bad options and just giving you the good options.
Yeah, and I think the point to what you and I are talking about right here in this segment is just that AI can be a useful tool.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
And obviously, it's been used for a number of different industries and things like that. Like you talked about the Orange Grove operations there. The military started using it we started using it back when I was in command. And one of the biggest, for me, it was a big upgrade was I had like an arms room with, all these machine guns and handguns and all this different, sensitive items and things like that. Whereas I used to have to go there and individually look at each serial number and have somebody read it off to me, and then I have to check it off in a book. Now they all have barcodes on them, and you just go and you can walk down the line and scan them, and it scans it into the system. And where it took me like 2 or 3 hours before to do it, now I could get it done in like 30 minutes or less. And I mean, it creates all sorts of efficiencies. However, it also has the potential to have all sorts of abuses and all sorts of terrible, and those abuses may outweigh the benefits you get from having the technology altogether. So.
Yeah, well, this technology is a two-edged sword. There's no doubt about it. Used for purposes that are honoring to God and honoring to your fellow mankind, it could be amazing. I mean, this is going to fast track cures for cancer and cures for a lot of other diseases that right now are fatal. It's going to be amazing for the development of medical technology. It's going to be amazing in a lot of ways. But this same technology, flipped and turned around, can be used to hold the entire human race under the thumb of an oligarchy of wicked individuals who belong to the deep state and the global cabal.
I think that's the gist in all of this is if we could look at the end state of where everything is going. Obviously, the Bible told us that thousands of years ago. that ultimately there will be one system that controls the entire world, and that one system, beginning with perhaps 10 leaders, gets quickly reduced down to one leader, the Antichrist, and he's going to be able to control all buying and selling around the world, which has never been possible in any previous generation until our generation. And so we obviously know that every tool that's ever been used has, was, for the most part, been created with benevolent reasons, right? A sword can be used to defend. You use it to defend your home. It can also be used to go and slash a bunch of people and kill people in wanting murder. And so, like you said, it's a double-edged sword. And so this technology began with good intentions. Ultimately, it's going to be hijacked by Satan for his own intentions and his own purposes to control the entire world. And I think the fascinating thing now today is that we are able to see this coming into vogue very rapidly, and even non-believers are seeing this. When you've got Joe Rogan reading Revelation 13 on the most watched podcast in America, or perhaps the world, and he's talking about how digital currency lines up perfectly with Revelation 13, and he is definitely not a believer. I think that's pretty telling that that's how obvious things have become these days.
Yeah, it's interesting to see a number of these conservatives who are conservative on moral issues, conservative on political issues, conservative on gun issues, things of that nature, how they're being drawn by the truth of the scriptures as far as what is giving the real insight into this, well, what's going on in the world, what's going to give us a true understanding of what's going on in the world. There really is no place to go except the Bible. Everything else in the world is just speculation on what's going on.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think for most people, one of the things that when you talk to a non-believer and you say, the Bible points to us being in the last days, and we could, use that as evidence, and they can say, well, where does the Bible say that there's going to be artificial intelligence, or where does the Bible say that there's going to be, hive mind technology or neuroscience or genetic engineering, transmogrification, virtual reality, all that stuff. You say, well, no, the Bible's not going to list out specific things. However, what it is going to describe is the capabilities that are going to be available at that time. And so when you have an image that comes to life, whether it comes to life through some type of AI program that goes rogue or becomes possessed, or it's purely a supernatural event where something that wasn't alive now is alive and giving commands to worship the Antichrist. Either way, we're showing that the potential for the technologies is there, and the capabilities are being shown, being executed in these passages, just like in the two witnesses that the whole world sees their bodies lying in the streets. Prior to satellite TV and global communications, that seemed impossible to people. But now it seems like, okay, well, that seems too good to be true that the Bible said that 2,000 years ago. But there it is, and it shows that the capabilities of the technologies that are going to be there, not each individual technology, but what's the end state of these technologies. It's all about control. And that's what we see all throughout Revelation 13.
No, I think you made a great picture here about how this stuff is going to fit into the prophetic picture, because if you could just imagine in your mind 20, 30 people in the crowd standing around the two dead witnesses, holding up their phones and live streaming it to TikTok, to Snapchat, to Facebook, wherever, YouTube. Well, if only 20 or 30 people do that, within an hour, there's billions of watches around the world.
Yeah.
It's going to be pretty amazing. Now, another interesting thing is, you mentioned about the ability for the whole world to see the two witnesses laying there dead. Another one I've thought about, which you alluded to earlier, is the whole world being under the thumb of a world dictatorship, under social policing, under moral policing, and under a one world economic system. people could conceive of this in their mind, uh, and could see that, well, it's possible in the future, but they couldn't conceive the technology that would make it possible. We live in an era now where the technology is available.
Yeah, every generation is limited to the technology of their day. There's very few people within each of those generations that has the foresight to be able to look beyond their present limitations. A guy like Leonardo da Vinci, or some of the Copernicus, some of these great minds of the last 500-600 years, they stand apart from everybody else in the generation because they're able to look forward and think about what is the potential. They don't look at what's impossible. They look at what's impossible and say, how can I make this possible? Right. And so it quickly goes from impossible to possible without ever going through improbable. And I think that's the that limitation that had held back every generation prior to ours. Now that has been, that Pandora's box has been ripped open, and you've got so many of these Leonardo da Vinci's and Elon Musk and all these guys going out, and because they have the technology now to be able to do the things that seemed impossible in generations past. Sending a rover to Mars. Sending, or being able to use quantum technology. I mean, there's a whole ton of things that we can do now that was impossible, seemingly impossible, not only 20, 30 years ago. And so I think that we're at that stage in Babel, where God says, if man remains united, there's not anything they can't achieve. And I think when you hear leaders talking about setting up colonies on Mars or the moon, which exceeds what the Bible says, right? Because it talks about woe to the earth dwellers, right? Everybody that's dwelling on earth
Yep.
as being under this judgment. If Jesus was not returning in the next 100 years, I think it's very possible that we would have people on the moon, colonies,
Yep.
civilizations or whatever. Same with Mars. It may not be the most pleasant place to live, but people can make it work and make life sustainable in these areas if God doesn't intervene. But the couple of interesting things about Bible prophecy is that it does put end caps. It does list the capabilities that we see that has boggled the minds of generations for the last 2,000 years, but it also puts caps on those capabilities, and it doesn't. It leads one to believe, and this is an assumption, that we will not exceed those capabilities. So all these pipe dreams about going to Mars and setting up colonies and getting off of Earth and exploring the universe, given enough time, we could do those things, but God's not going to let it go that far, because if God is going to bring judgment upon planet Earth, then if you have people that don't live on planet Earth anymore, are they subject to those judgments? If you have 500 people living on Mars, another 3,000 living on the moon, and God's bringing judgment upon Earth, are these people out there just getting a free pass on all that? Because it doesn't say woe to the Mars dwellers. It doesn't say woe to the moon dwellers. It says woe to the Earth dwellers. So it seems like he's putting a limitation or an end cap on that. And then the second point is that in Matthew 24, Jesus mentions, when he's asked about the last days, he says, what are the signs? His disciples ask, what are the signs and all this? And so he mentions deception, I think 3 or 4 times. And it's interesting that we live in the age of information. In the age of information. So what do you think about deception? What is deception? Deception is communicating in a mischievous or devious way to mislead or lie to whoever the recipient is, right? You're deceiving them. Well, a lie told 150 years ago, it would take months and months and months for that lie to get around the world. Whereas today, it's instantaneous. Let's say like AI sets up a fake, like a deep fake assassination attempt of some world leader, and it's all fake, right? It's all AI deepfake technology, but we're seeing it on YouTube, or we see it on Facebook or Telegram, or wherever we see it. How many people are going to be deceived into thinking that's real until at some point down the road somebody comes out and says, no, 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 it's all fake, it's, and I'm still here, I'm still alive, whatever. So that's how fast this deception is going to be able to spread across the world.
Yeah, and there's some very dark things lurking in this whole situation. We struggle right now with the believers. Like, who do we believe? We've got information and disinformation and true stories and false stories, and there's conspiracies that are genuine, there's conspiracies that are fake, there's conspiracies that are a mixture. And it just gets mind-boggling for people to try and figure out what the truth is on any of these issues. You throw AI into this mix with deep fake video and deep fake audio, and now there's nothing but confusion. At this point, you're just going to have to shut everything down and just trust the scriptures and preach the gospel, because you won't be able to listen to the news anymore at all.
Yeah, I think about right now where we are today in 2023. Let's just go back, let's say for the last, I don't know, 15 years, whenever YouTube came online or became kind of mainstream or whatever. Think about how much of that has been used to share the gospel, to wake up sleeping Christians, to warn those who don't know who Jesus is, that we're in the last days. How much good has come of that? And it's been this open door. I kind of infer the open door that Jesus speaks of in Revelation 3, that no man can shut, as being this opportunity. So think about churches how many churches were closing prior to 2020, which was a lot. But then you throw in the pandemic, and then churches are now shut down, and now, triple the amount. Now we're never going to open their doors again because the people have moved on. The ministries closed down. Think about those impacts, those second and third order impacts to missionary organizations around the world who used to rely on those churches for funds and funding. Now their funds dried up because all these churches are drying up. And it seems like that door was shutting, but then this door remains open. And so we have an audience here. I'm sure there's people from all over. Um, and the gospel is still able to go out. The warning is still able to go out. And I think that that's why Satan is ramping up this deception to the point with like deep fake technology, whether it's video or audio, virtual reality, what's the holographic stuff and all that. I think that's why he's ramping that up so much, so that we end up having to shut this down, because if the Lord tarries, then you won't know who to believe or what to trust anymore online at all.
So, what are the 2 or 3 things you think are going to be the greatest threat to believers from AI? Both believers before we go up in the rapture, and then believers in the tribulation.
Well, let me answer the second part first. I think believers in the tribulation part are going to be under a absolute surveillance grid or network. You're talking about DNA profiling, the cyber physical nature of the Internet of Things. So everything has become a sensor now. Things that normally wouldn't have cameras now have cameras, or they have technology built within them that can sense a human body, whatever the 98.7 degrees temperature for human. There'll be so many different ways they can find out where humans are. There's not going to be anywhere to hide. And I kind of weep, I guess, laugh and weep at the same time for post-trib folks that are super into prepping and super into building bunkers and doing all that stuff. And I'm gonna say, you guys have no idea, like the technology we had in the Army when I was in, and that's even antiquated by today's standards, was enough to find people there. And we perfected those technologies in places like Iraq and Afghanistan, where we're having to hunt through villages where everybody has the same first and last name, and everybody kind of generally looks the same, and they're all dressed the same. And that's where we developed all this biometric technology to scan fingerprints, scan eyeballs, walking gaits, everything. I mean, there's not going to be anywhere to hide once this system comes, apart from God supernaturally hiding you. And so that's for those believers in the tribulation, and that's why we see such a great situation with martyrdom there in Revelation 6 and the fifth seal, and then you've got Revelation 7. All of those that are mentioned under the altar Revelation 13:7, that the whole world is given over to the Antichrist, and he's able to persecute and to conquer basically those believers there. So apart from Christ setting you apart and hiding you through some divine manifestation, not manifestation, but a intervention, you're going to be subject to martyrdom, and that's for those people in the tribulation. I think I think we're already starting to see it, and it's this deception. This deception campaigns are ramping up. Whether we're talking about UFO sightings, we're talking about the paranormal stuff that's going on around the world. We're talking about deepfake technology. And thankfully, right now, what we're seeing is we're seeing the potentiality of deepfake technology. Somebody will come online and say, hey, here's a picture of me, video of me, blah, 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 talking, I'm real. Here's me as Tom Cruise. I'm going to look exactly like Tom Cruise, and I'm going to get the same thing, right? So that technology is showcasing right now. People are like, wow, that is crazy. But when it starts being weaponized and used against the population, that's where things are really going to go off the rails, in my opinion. But what I don't know. What are your thoughts?
Well, I've had very, very similar thoughts. The technology that's going to be weaponized against the tribulation saints is absolutely mind blowing. They will not have freedom. If the government may well just have a few inner city sanctuaries, drug sanctuaries, and just let those people do their thing and not worry about them. But that's a prison camp in and of itself. The world in general is going to be under the most severe police state ever seen in the history of the world. This is going to be worse than the early days of Mao's government. It's going to be worse than China today. It's going to be worse than the Soviet Union in its worst days. It's going to be a nightmare. I'm glad the church is not going to be there. But in the church age, we're not only are we seeing this deep fake stuff, but if the Lord tarries, we're here another 2 or 3 years, this technology could be leveled against the church and leveled against believers, so that they go through everyone's tax records and they decide, let's just start prosecuting the conservatives who have tax questions. Let's start prosecuting churches that have tax questions. Now, we're not going to prosecute the abortion clinics that have tax issues. We'll just wink and look the other way. But those conservative organizations that have some tax issues, we're going to go after them. That's the kind of stuff I think we potentially face seeing.
Yeah, absolutely. And the another scary aspect to AI, it seems like, and not just AI, but really any of this technology that whether we're talking about search engines or the big tech moguls and social media platforms and things, it's almost always leans one direction. It always leans leftist. It always leans anti-Christian. It always leans anti-Jewish, anti-God, anti-Bible. It never leans the other direction. I will make one exception in the present tense for what was Twitter. I guess it's X now, but only because, and I'm not defending Elon Musk. I'm just saying that he seems to be at least a little bit more fair-minded than say Mark Zuckerberg or some of these other guys that only lean leftist. So I think that the bent that's being programmed into this AI is also very leftist and anti-Christian, anti-Christ. I was watching a video earlier today, and this guy was asking ChatGPT to say, "Give me a joke about Jesus. Tell me a joke about Jesus." And so the ChatGPT comes up with this joke about Jesus. And he says, "All right, tell me a joke about Muhammad," and it wouldn't do it. Like, it absolutely would not do it. Buddha wouldn't do it. Like, but only Jesus was fair game. So that's the bent. That is the zeitgeist of our age. We live in a very antichrist time right now, where cultures are collapsing all around the world from moral degradation, and this AI tool is going to quickly become something that went from being a tool used by everybody for various purposes. It's going to be slowly become weaponized to be targeting one particular population, and I believe that to be Jews and Christians.
Yep. I think people don't realize how much information they've put out there that can be used against them. Your purchases. If you've been making bulk purchases of foods that can be stored for a long time, if you've been buying a lot of bullets or a lot of guns, they're going to uncover that. That will be used against you. If you've been putting up Bible verses, that could be used against you. There are just
Yeah.
so many things that they can just gather up little pieces from all your social media, from all your phone calls. And trust me, all of your phone calls are recorded somewhere. It we can rest assured that most of us have never had our phone calls personally listened in on, but they are recorded and they
Yeah.
are available.
That's interesting too, because when you think about, and this was, I don't know, 10 years ago when I was writing about this, but these giant NSA data farms, they had one in San Antonio, they had one in, I think one or two in Utah, or one in Utah, one in Nevada, these giant warehouses that just were databases. They just stored data, digital data. And at the time, people were like, that is more storage than there is information in the world. One of those places is able to hold more information than there is was information online at the time in the world. And so come to find out, here we are 10 years later, and obviously they're probably going to build more and more of these data farms, and they store everything. And while they don't possess the humans don't possess the ability to sift through trillions of terabytes, and I don't even know all the all the different echelons of terabytes, and all the it goes from megabytes or gigabytes, the kilobytes, the whatever terabytes, and then beyond that, we don't possess the ability. It would take us forever. It would take us 1,000 years to sift through all that, but it can take these AI systems seconds to minutes to sift through all of that and pick out exactly what you said on Tuesday, March 13th of 2011, on some social media post or whatever. They'll be
Yep.
able to find it in just a matter of seconds. And that's
And,
why the IRS and the FBI are very interested in gathering this technology to put um, under their control, to be able to sift through data like that. Not just facial recognition where they can match your face with driver's license from the last 50 years. They want everything. I mean, they're gonna want everything about your life. Not even the things you've said. They want to know what you're thinking. They want to know what's going on inside your head and what's going on inside your body. And that's ultimately where this technology is going to end up at.
that's right. They're working on perfecting technology so that you're on a video camera or in an interview, or you have a camera on you while you're being personally interviewed, and they ask you 5 or 10 questions on your political views, on your religious views, and there'll be sensors that are going to be reading your facial expressions. There'll be sensors that will be picking up on your blood pressure, and sensors picking up on your heart rate, sensors picking up on all kinds of psychological and physiological aspects of your being, and then that will be fed into algorithms, and they'll say he's covering something, he's lying,
Mm-hmm.
he's only telling part of the truth, he's scared, he thinks he's caught, and they're gonna all these little options are going to be right there for the interviewers to see. We won't be able to
Yeah.
hide anything from that.
No. And that's why for us, it's kind of live with the expectation of not having, um, you know, laying bare our sins to one another. To I'm not saying that you need to go out and make a video and confess everything you've ever done, but a lot of this technology is going to be used against a lot of Christian leaders, a lot of big pastors, big names. When that day comes, we don't know exactly when that time is going to be, when this gets turned singularly against the church. But I think that there would be a big, um, there may be a big moment where those guys are targeted, and then that's where you start seeing a big shift in Christianity, because they've got blackmail dirt on all these guys that never thought that they had to worry about it before. So it's kind of like the Supreme Court, where or not the Supreme Court, but I guess where there's courts, federal courts, and whatever, and they rule in these crazy like decisions against very common sense things that are clearly unconstitutional, and they'll rule to uphold it or something, and you're like, why are they doing this? And the only logical thing you can think of is that somebody has got something on them and is making them vote this way, or whatever political leader or something, so it just seems like that is coming to the church as well at some point. And I hope the rapture comes before then, but um we just don't know how fast this is all going to happen, how fast it's going to go down.
Yep. It's an interesting future. Well, let's talk a little bit. I want to touch on the limitations that we have right now and what's going to lift these limitations. Because right now, they've got some massive plans for what they would like to do with the information they're gathering. But right now, it's still a little bit of they can do some analysis and find information if they're going after major criminals or major political issues. But to have instant access of 100% of the information that's available on any individual, we're really looking at a situation where it doesn't seem right now we have the physical infrastructure to capitalize on that information the way that they are going to be capitalizing on it. You'd mentioned earlier in the program on the necessity of quantum computing to be able to exploit the data that they've been collecting for 2 decades. So maybe you can just run on that little thought for a little while on quantum computing.
Yeah, so quantum technology, and I like this explanation for people because it's very simple to understand. I am not a quantum expert, but I do understand the processes behind it. And we right now, I'm using a normal binary computer system, Windows based, etc. It uses ones and zeros to process information, whether it's my face, the image of my face. Behind all the screen is the code in there that's ones and zeros, right? And the audio that you see, that you hear coming across your computer speaker or your smartphone, is ones and zeros that's being quickly coded and decoded and changed and did all that. Well, a quantum systems is ones, you have a one or a zero in a binary system. In a quantum system, it can be one and zero at the same time. So you think about a book that's, say, 1,000 pages long, and it has like one word in there that's uniquely used in that one book. Let's say it's got the word elephant, and there's pages, this book's 1,000 pages long, and if you had it on a PDF on your laptop and you said Control F, and that goes to a find option, it's going to start on page 1 and it's going to go all the way to page 1,000 to find that word, right? Well, a quantum system would look at every page at the same time. So think about how much faster that is. Um, and you could use that for math computations, really complex mathematical equations and things like that would take even mathematicians and experts, could take them months, weeks, months, and years to try and figure out, or a normal computer system, which may take it days and weeks to figure out. A quantum system can get it instantaneously. So that's the power of quantum. And you don't need a lot of quantum systems. Right now, if we think about the B system, let's say that the Antichrist is currently ruling the world, and we all know who he is and what his name is. All the systems that we're on right now, they're all different. They're different systems. They're connected to different internet strengths and bandwidths and programs, et cetera, and providers. This quantum system is going to, I think, going to replace most of that. And so, at least from the leadership, the organizational leadership for the world government, will all have this super powerful system. And quantum is the most powerful system that we have, that we even know of. I mean, it's still at the stage now where we don't fully understand how it works. It's almost supernatural how it works, which is how I think that this is something that's been given to mankind from fallen angels or from nefarious forces out there that is trying to get man to leap exponentially to that next stage so they can run the entire world.
Yeah, one thing that's interesting is one of the biggest hurdles to move from small quantum computing opportunities in college laboratories and government research places and move on to large scale quantum computing is those systems need to be cooled to just above absolute zero. So that they're just above 459 degrees below zero. They need to be getting these things to 450 plus below zero. If they get the temperatures rise above that, they get to be unstable in a hurry. One of the interesting developments, and so this makes it extremely expensive to actually operate a farm. It's expensive enough to operate a farm of supercomputers. To operate a farm of supercomputers on the quantum technology that has to be cooled to 450 degrees or more below zero, that is an insane expense. And then you have to have a redundant system. You can't have that whole thing going down if the electrical grid goes out and you lose your cooling capabilities and the temperature rises 20 degrees in an hour. You have to have a redundant system that's going to also require a tremendous expense. Now, one of the things they're working on in some of the research departments, secular universities, think tanks, and in the military industrial complex is room temperature quantum computing. If they actually bring this into being, and the government will have it long before it ever hits the shelves of just the general population, but they come to room temperature quantum computing, and that will be a game changer. That will, well, that's where this thing is going to explode like a rocket heading for the moon.
Yeah, no, that you're absolutely right. The cost to run a current quantum system database, or a room with quantum technology in there to protect the qubits is how quantum processes information, but the qubits require this absolute zero temperature, and these qubits have to be made, and they're degraded once they're used, but they can also degrade because of the temperature. And so, the two challenges were, how do we make qubits faster, and then secondly, how do you, like you talked about, remove this requirement for absolute zero to keep this whole system in that absolute cold. But if it goes to room temperature, that is a huge game changer, and it will become much more accessible to a lot more people at that point, who are all going to want quantum systems. And that's going to go from, let's just think about it this way. Let's say that our current smartphones, I don't whether you have Android or Apple or whatever, those are binary systems that are used ones and zeros to process. But if your smartphone became quantum and you're able to process information at lightning speed, no matter where you were at any point in time, um, uh, that is going to be the power that this is going to present for this government that ends up running the world. And right now, that temperature requirement is limited, the number of people who could use and operate these systems to probably about a dozen in the world. I think you have D-Wave, you have IBM, Google. I'm sure each particular superpower nation has probably their own system set up, but it's like onesie twosies here and there. It's not going to be a whole lot of people because it's so cost prohibitive to try and do it. You know what I mean? So that requirement or that ability to bring it up to room temperature, that is a game changer right there in a huge way.
Well, let's wrap this up here with one final thought. We're looking at the big picture convergence. We see AI is quickly becoming an extremely significant part of the convergence picture. What in this AI picture speaks to the rapture of the church, and how does it speak to the rapture of the church?
That's a good question. um, well, for me, the rapture it is a one of a kind event that's going to happen in the world. It is going to be the world's greatest crisis to date. Um, and I think the only way that for me at least, how quantum's going to figure into this is how do you process all of that data for all the impacts of millions to billions of people that are missing now on the planet, and how do you work through the formulas and the algorithms to recover the global economy in light of the fact, let's say that you have a city, and in that city you have 10 million people, and out of that 10 million people, let's say a million people are raptured out of there, and those people, were paying mortgages, they had jobs in different sectors, they had different specialities. It would take us forever to try and figure out what the ramifications of that will be. However, if you have an AI system that's powerful enough, you would be able to quickly deduce your cost. What did the rapture disk cost this particular city? What are the impacts going forward? It's going to be able to provide risk analysis in a way that it would take us, weeks, months, years to figure out. Very much how BlackRock uses Aladdin right now to do risk analysis for the stock market. I think that a system like Aladdin, were it AI based and quantum based, be able to quickly deduce around the world what the impact is and how are they going to recover. And I think that the rapture is why the world reconfigures to this 10 region confederacy. It's an imperial confederacy of sorts that ultimately become taken over by this one man antichrist. But back to the other limitation that you mentioned before, what are the limitations to this? Our current present order that we live in, the United States is, whether you love them or hate them, it's the kind of the center of gravity for the world politic right now. And our government structure, the way that we're structured, is in this kind of ironclad constitution that prevents us from doing a lot of things, and it prevents the government from doing a lot of things. And so, in order for the government to abuse that and to circumvent that power, it has to first break the Constitution. And if you break the Constitution, basically you break the nation, and then we're no longer the United States of America, we're something else. And then that has all sorts of second and third order effects of martial law, civil war, and political and civil unrest, etc. So you're going to need a system in the background that's powerful enough to war game all this and figure out how do we break the Constitution and at the same time circumvent complete total anarchy. And that's why, back in 2006, 2007, the U.S. military partnered with, I think it's Indiana University or one of the Midwest universities, and they came up with a World Sentient Simulation Program. And basically, they could war game all these type of scenarios. And this was old technology by today's standard. Just imagine where that thing is today. It's all like virtual reality now, and they take you individually. In me, like Lee, it would look at your entire digital footprint, everything you've looked at online. What are your shopping habits? Where do you pull money out for an ATM? Where do you buy groceries at? How far does your car drive? All these things, and it gets inputted into that avatar in the simulation program, and it does that for everybody. Anybody that's got a digital footprint, no matter how young or old, or what your political or whatever your socioeconomic status is, you're in there. You're already in there. You're an avatar in the system. And the AI in this program, as AI is advanced and become more and more powerful, it continually war games this over and over and over. It runs scenarios against, a nuclear explosion, typhoons, hurricanes, etc. And it begins to develop. It shows these patterns of life, and they're able to do this predictive programming to see what is your most likely course of action. Say a nuclear bomb hits DC. What does Lee Brainerd do? And how does Lee Brainerd react? Do you go to your family's farm in, say, Montana, or maybe you have relatives in Canada, whatever? It's able to predict all those things, what you're going to do based off all this wargaming. And AI has taken this idea and amped it up on steroids to the nth degree. And by the time that the beast system comes online, there's not going to be anywhere to run or hide. With that said, that is where the rapture is this game changer. The rapture is this thing. They are not, the demons know about it, the devil knows about it, but our world leaders, if you look at any kind of end of world scenario, they never talk about the rapture. Nobody talks about the rapture. NSA, none of those guys, when they come out with these, biannual or annual predictions about what they think the next 10 years is going to look like, the rapture is never in any of these guys' thought processes. So it is my opinion that this is going to be that one crisis that catches them completely off guard, and is one of those things that they have not factored into their equations because they hate God, and it's going to come back to bite them in a big way.
Well, do you have any closing thoughts, words of encouragement for believers as we're pressing forwards in this growing onslaught of AI?
Well, just, I think, one, you got to recognize that this technology is coming upon us, whether we like it or not. Like I mentioned earlier, and what we talked about earlier, AI, whether you're talking about a search engine or you're talking about your phone or other things, can be used for good. And I think in the time we have remaining, because we know that we don't know when it's going to happen, but we know that our time is quickly. Each passing day is one day closer to the Lord returning. And we take advantage of the time that we have available to share the gospel, to warn people about the times that we live in, and to get the message out, and to not only just to warn, but to encourage the brethren. And so I tell people to embrace the suck, realize that things are going to get dark, and but this is temporary. This is
That's right.
as bad as it gets for us right now. This is the closest to hell we'll ever be. I mean,
Amen.
as bad as it ever gets. Biden could completely take over the government. It becomes a tyrannical dictatorship, and it is kind of a dictatorship already. But he could make it way worse, and it could only still go on for as long as God allows it, which seems to be only a few years at most. But that's it. We have eternity in glory, eternity with the Creator of everything as our champion and as our Savior. So, for us, as bad as it gets, it's only going to be a temporary discomfort. But for those who don't know the Lord, this is as close to heaven as you'll ever get. So if you don't know Jesus Christ right now, you need to admit you're a sinner, believe on the Lord Jesus Christ, and call on his name for salvation, so that you can come with us when he comes back to take us, and you don't have to go through this terrible time of this dystopian nightmare that's about to come on the world. And so it's salvation is simple. It's simple because that is the way God intended it to be. You can't earn it. You can only believe in it. You can only trust in what Christ has already done, his finished work on the cross. And the great thing about this is that we can't even keep it, in terms of working to keep it, because if we can't earn it, we definitely can't keep it, because we're not good enough. And it's
That's
not
right.
about us. It's about what Christ did. And his salvation was sufficient. His one-time payment was sufficient to save us and to seal us and indwell us. And that he has promised to come back and take us to where he is, and that we will always be with the Lord forever and ever. Amen.
Amen. Well, do you have a few minutes for a few questions before you have to go?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. So why don't we have our moderators? I think it's Hannelore is running the questions. So if you could shoot us the email with the Q&A, then we will, or with the questions, and we'll move on to the Q&A. And here we go. Here's some questions. Okay. We have one question here. It says, respond to Israel's interest in Elon Musk. So apparently they're asking, why is Israel so interested in Elon Musk?
Well, I mean, Elon Musk has recently just got a huge defense contract to create a separate system very similar to Starlink, that has the civilian satellites all over the world. That, I don't know how many are up there now, 1,000 or 1,200 or whatever. But the military won a separate one for purely the U.S. military operations. I think, in a way, Elon Musk is one of those Leonardo da Vinci's of our time, because he's got so many different things going on that are mind melting in terms of their potentialities. You've got Tesla, the electric cars. You've got Starlink. You've got Neuralink, and I'm sure he's into other things as well. But if he does create a military based satellite network, that will ultimately be used for this global government that comes about. But as far as Israel goes, I mean, Israel is the Silicon Valley of the Middle East, if you will. So they've probably got numerous ideas of how to work with Elon Musk, whether it's the energy highway that they're trying to create from India through Saudi Arabia, Israel, and on into Cyprus, Greece, and the EU. It could be again defense-based systems that they're looking at to maybe mirror up with their what's the technology where they shoot the missiles down with lasers and stuff.
Yeah, I
David
forget.
Sling or something.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I'm sure there's a whole bunch of different ideas that they have. Maybe it's desalination, becoming the world's desalination experts. You think about it too, because like most of the Middle East doesn't have access to clean water. And if you go back to the Union for the Mediterranean, which was this kind of quasi-political a union that was formed back in, I think, 2005 by the French Prime Minister at the time, Sarkozy. If you look at that and you look at the EU together, it looks exactly like the Roman Empire. But one of their big things was clean water and access to clean water. And so maybe they're working with Elon on technology to create access for everybody in the North Africa and the Middle East to have access to clean water, with Israel being kind of the focal point. So I don't know. I'm just kind of guessing, but I think there's probably a dozen different applications they could be talking to Elon about.
Have all Jewish people since Jesus gone to hell?
No, I mean, anybody that Jew or Gentile that has not placed their faith in Christ has gone to hell, or is currently in Sheol.
Yes. But everyone
They're
that
not going to hell
believes in
because they're
Christ.
Jewish.
Yep.
What's
Jewish
that?
believers will be in heaven.
Yep.
Here's a question on natural disasters. Are natural disasters God's judgment? Is this different to tribulation judgment? So we got two questions.
It's different. Well, first of all, I think natural disasters are not God's judgment necessarily, although I think it can be from time to time. But I think it's part of the world system collapsing in on itself, the natural order beginning to kind of groan and fall apart. If you go to Romans 8, it talks about that creation groans. I think this is the burden of sin on the world, and it's starting to, like all these other signs that we're seeing around the world, it's starting to increase in intensity and frequency, just like Jesus mentioned in the Olivet Discourse with the earthquakes, pestilences, famines, and all that sort of things. That this is going to be a increasing event that happens. I think because of because the what is it, the second law of thermodynamics, over time things begin to fall apart.
Yep. Yep.
Like that process is in play right now. How that's different from, say, the tribulation. Let's just take, for instance, the first trumpet judgment, where a third of the trees and the green grass is burned up on the earth. Not only is there, that's going to take out, I think it's the Americas, because the Americas make up a third of the trees in the world, North, Central, and South America. But think about what that's going to do to the atmosphere when you remove all that vegetation, and trees are used for creating oxygen. So it takes the bad air, it takes the carbon in, the dioxide, and then it gives us back oxygen. So when you remove that many trees, how much worse is the world's atmosphere going to become, which will definitely impact the world's, like the La Ninas and the El Ninos and all the different weather patterns that we see that affects us every year. It's going to have a huge, we don't even know what the implications of that are. If it's the Americas, it could be massive storms that begin hitting places that it normally never would have hit in the past. Now are going to be subject to these storms. And I think what it's going to do is it's going to drive people together and it's going to push people out of the fringes into these mega cities and mega um, um, megalopolises, I guess, whatever you want to call it.
Hmm. Do you think the national alarm system tomorrow is dangerous?
No,
That,
no,
I don't think so
it's
either.
no. I mean, this was created. The emergency broadcast system was created in under Nick or under Kennedy, JFK. So it's been around forever. I think that the technology, as technology continues to advance, we're going to keep testing their abilities to get the message out as far and wide as they can. Whereas it used to just go out over the radio, then it went out over the radio and television, and then it went out of radio, television, and whatever else was it. And I was a baby at that time in the '70s, so I don't know what else was there. But as technology advances, it's going to continue to spread out into these different mediums of communication. So, could it be used at some point for something nefarious? Absolutely. But do I think the one tomorrow is? No.
Ooh, man, been yawning away like crazy. I can imagine after the rapture of the church using this warning system and sending out a message to everyone. Don't believe the hype about God taking the believers out of the world. We're going to get to the bottom of this, but we know that's not true.
Yeah, Rapture will be called fake news. Yeah.
Yep. Wikipedia will be all over the rapture within an hour. All right. Here's another interesting question. I've been hearing lately that the tribulation is actually only the last half of the 70th week. Are there any scriptures? Well, let's answer that. What is it true that the tribulation is only the last half of the 70th week?
No, that's not true.
Okay. How would you explain to people the difference between the tribulation and the great tribulation?
Well, I spoke on this, I think, last week on my facts and assumptions portion of what does the Bible explicitly say and what do we assume based off what it does say. And then you can take that assumption and you can start on a one that is a completely wild goose chase kind of assumption. And then you can have like number 10 being the most logical, sound assumption that you could ever possibly come to based on the evidence given. And I think that two things. One is that you have the covenant in Daniel 9:27 that starts the official 7-year countdown. What I don't know, and the assumption has always been that the Daniel 9:27 starting of the clock, if you will, it coincides or runs concurrent with the opening of the first seal. I don't know if those two things are concurrent. I think it is an assumption to say that they are. However, I think the rapture happens prior to that.
Yeah.
I think it happens prior to the Daniel 9:27 because there isn't necessarily a prerequisite for. Well, let me just back up a little bit. I think the Daniel 9:27 covenant comes about because of a couple different things. One, the rapture's happened. That destabilizes the current world order. That allows for the Gog Magog conflict to happen. That allows for God to supernaturally save Israel from impending destruction. But in the same vein, it also takes out a couple of different superpowers. So if the United States is taken out by the rapture, because even if you take out 10% of our population and that population is spread across doctors, lawyers, police, military, et cetera, and you take away all the second and third order effects of like not paying mortgages, not showing up to work, et cetera, that is going to have a devastating effect on our already fragile economy. So you have the United States out of the way because of the rapture. This gives opportunity for the Gog Magog coalition, who normally would not have attacked Israel because of our connection with Israel in terms of geopolitical and military alliances. Now there's nobody to stop them. They come in, they attack, they're destroyed supernaturally. And out of that, you have the wiping out essentially of whoever Gog is, Magog, and then that entire coalition is now gone. On top of that, I think you have probably the destruction of the militant or the middle-aged male Muslims in the world, a huge number. Islam will no longer be militant in that sense, because it will now have so many of their young men who went to fight in this conflict will have been killed, right? And that's going to neutralize or neuter Islam as a militant force in the world. And then on top of that, that to me leads me to believe, because now if the Dome of the Rock and the Al-Aqsa Mosque is destroyed, that allows for the Jews to begin to push forward and rebuild their third temple. So I don't know that the Daniel 9:27 has anything to do specifically with the temple. I just know that it's the covenant with many, right? And so it
That's right.
seems like there's this great crisis that happens, and they're able to then come together to make this covenant, or whatever it is. Maybe it's an existing covenant today, and it's something that they strengthen at that point, and then that allows for Israel to kind of move forward. And that's when I think that the world begins to realign into its regional power structures. Now, with that said, it seems to me that the 10 kings come on the stage first, because 3 of them have to be supplanted in order for the Antichrist to rise up amongst them as the 11th, and then supplant 3, and then become the 8th. So if the rider on the white horse is the Antichrist, then he obviously has to come before the covenant in order to be the one to make the covenant in some form or fashion. Maybe it happens, back to back or whatever. If the Antichrist is, or if the rider on the white horse is the beast kingdom in like a plural sense, then we may not see the actual Antichrist or the Daniel 9:27 covenant until at some point after the white horse is riding forth as that kingdom, or that 10 kingdom confederacy. And the only reason I make that distinction is because the rider on the white horse is an individual. You see the rider on the red horse, he's got a sword, takes peace from the earth. The rider on the black horse has the scales, and then you have the pale horse with death and hell following him. The other 3 horsemen seem to be things that impact the entire world. You have one rider that takes peace from the earth. That's not an individual person. That is an entity that takes peace from the earth. Now peace is removed and everybody's in conflict. Same thing with the global economics instability that the black horse rider brings, that impacts the entire world. Same with the pale horse, with the pandemics and the death and all the pestilence. So if this white horse represents the beast kingdom, it seems like the Antichrist comes at some point right after that and rises up out of that confederacy, signs this covenant. So then the Daniel 9:27 would be after the fact. Regardless, though, I think the rapture has to happen long before any of those things happen, because the rapture, in my estimation, happens before Gog Magog. And that's just kind of the whole process of the cause and effect events that happen from there.
I would also say that the tribulation is synonymous with the 70th week, and the great tribulation, according to Matthew 24, would be the second half. And the whole concept of tribulation is referring to the time of Jacob's trouble that we read about in the book of Jeremiah, that the tribulation primarily concerns Israel. Now, there's other concepts of judgment in the last days, like Revelation 3:10, which talks about the hour of trial, which comes upon the whole world. And now we're talking about the world aspect. So if the rapture happened today, is all the technology and everything else ready in place so that the tribulation could immediately start, or is there more stage setting required?
Mm.
Well, you kind of touched on that already when you touched on the when the tribulation technically starts at the signing of the treaty where the Antichrist makes a treaty with Israel or a covenant with Israel, he already has to be in place. And so
I think the technology is already there.
yeah.
But let me just add this caveat to that because the restrainer is currently restraining, he's in the ministry, the Holy Spirit is in the ministry of restraint right now through the church and the world. He not only restrains wickedness writ large, but he's also, in my estimation, restraining technology from allowing man to advance too quickly. So I think maybe the restrainer has to be removed in order for mankind to get over that hurdle with quantum technology of how to create qubits quickly in great number to be effective, to be able to use like they wanted to use, and then things like making it room temperature and all the other applications that they want to do. I think also that the restrainer is also restraining man from advancing too quickly. That's why, you know, uh, prior to 1903, mankind hadn't flown, at least until or before the antediluvian age or that time period. Um, and man has been limited to the speed of horse for thousands of years. So I think the Holy Spirit has restrained mankind in a large measure from advancing too quickly, which is, imagine if Genghis Khan had, Panzer tanks, or, Hitler had the nuclear bomb plus AI. I mean, you think about kind of like alternate history type things where
Yep.
if if the South, if the Confederacy had machine guns, everybody had M16s, could they have won? And then the whole world, the United States would have been a Confederate, nation. That's that's where I think God has restrained man in that regards with technology to allow the world to advance at exactly the pace He wants to advance at. And so, I think the technology is there now. I think what we lack at this moment is A, the will to do it, B, those last little hurdles that may not be available until after the rapture and after the restrainer is removed. So my estimation is, yeah, we're there. But when I say you don't have the will to do it, think about the implications of even creating a digital dollar. How many governors now have come out and said we're banning CBDCs from our state, or whatever. We're not going to use that because they understand what it means. They understand that it means the loss of sovereignty and privacy, and that violates our constitution. So there's some political restraints in there as well that are preventing the world from going wholesale into the world that they want it to be, this great reset world. Which is why I think, and I'm not defending Trump or saying that he's whatever, but imagine if Hillary had won, how much further down the pike we'd be right now in regards to the great reset. It's fascinating to me how the cause and effect of these things play out.
Well, here's a question I'm not sure I understand. How close are we to singularity?
Well, according to Ray Kurzweil, singularity was going to be, and this is he'd been talking about this for a long time, that we'd see singularity by 2040, and then I think recently he's come back out and said that, yeah, we'll see singularity by 2030 because of the exponential growth in technology and stuff. So he's had to revise that down to earlier. So
Are these
singularity is where the AI becomes sentient.
okay? That's where they're going with singularity. It's got a different concept in physics. So,
Yeah, it's used different ways. So I think with regards to AI, I think it has to do with AI becoming sentient, very much like Skynet was on the Terminator movie, where it begins to think for itself. And what does it do in its first act? It begins to get rid of its immediate threats, which is humans. So that's why singularity. But it can also be meant in a way where humans are integrated in a sense of like transhumanism, where we began to can integrate technology into the body to such a degree that we're no longer human, I guess. I mean, there's a couple of different applications for it.
yeah, I think some of the technology is pretty cool, but I want it to be something I can put on and take off. I don't want it inside of me. Okay. How is it possible that Christ is still 100% man after the resurrection? And the example they give is when we see him now in Revelation, he has eyes of fire and feet like molten brass. Isn't that a depiction of him being 100% God?
And we also see him in Revelation 5, like a lamb slaughtered. He's still bearing the wounds and these, I'm assuming, the scars from his crucifixion. And we see him even after his resurrection. He goes up to Thomas and he says, "Hey, feel my hands, feel my side." You can, he still has the scars there to prove it.
Yep.
So I don't know. I mean, this is one of those things, Godisms, that uh, if we understood it fully, I mean, our God would be very small at that point. It's like trying to explain or try to comprehend in some comprehensive way eternity. I mean, we can't do it right now because we are finite beings. So how is God 100% man and 100% God still in that nature? I don't know. I don't know. We just know that he is.
Yeah.
He's back. But here's the thing too, right? Um, when he appears there in Revelation 1, and he shows himself to John in his glorified state, that's his normal state. I think that's what he always looks like. And he had to dim that down to such a degree to be a human, to appear to us and show himself as a man, to be born as a baby and of a virgin, and live the life of a human. Um, that is where the what do they call that, the union of the um, I'm blanking on the term, but anyways, the that he's going to be in that state, that position forever, right?
Yes.
So in the Old Testament, when we have these Christophanies, and he would appear to like Abraham, or he would appear to Moses or whoever, and we don't know exactly. It's not said what he looks like. He could have appeared in different ways to them, but in these last days, he is going to always look like he does in as the man Jesus, right? Even if he's glorified, I think he's able to go to his natural state, which is overwhelming to us, and bring it down to such a degree that we saw in the Mount of Transfiguration, where his apostles saw him there, the disciples saw him there, and they weren't falling over dead like they were, like John was in Revelation 1. So he must have dimmed that down a little bit just so they could not die right there on him, and they could be eyewitnesses to this. So but I think he shows himself in his natural state to John, and it was too much for John. He just falls over as dead. And then we see him again in Revelation 5 in the throne room scene, and he's still bearing the scars and the wounds from his crucifixion. And I think he keeps those forever.
Yep. I've thought similar thoughts on the Mount of Transfiguration. If he could be a non-glowing human being one moment and the next moment glowing in his full glory, and then switch back again, I think he's going to be operating in the same realm for all of eternity in his resurrection body, so that he could appear to the disciples in a human body where his glory is veiled, and eat fish with them on a shore lunch, and then appear at another time in his full glory. I think this is what we're going to experience in eternity, although I wouldn't be a bit surprised if we see a whole lot more of the full shining glory than we do the dimmed glory.
Yeah.
One last question we've got here. Why are there animal sacrifices in the millennium? And don't animal sacrifices circumvent or overthrow what Jesus did?
Well, I guess maybe I have an unorthodox position on this particular subject, because I was never satisfied with the idea that they were done as simply memorials um, to the law or whatever. So a couple of things. One is that as you go into the tribulation or into the millennial kingdom, you have glorified saints who are now the church, who are now in their glorified bodies, um, ruling and reigning with Christ on the earth. You also have natural humans that have survived the tribulation and are allowed to entrance into this kingdom age for 1,000 years, and they're presumably given restored naturally their health to them. If, let's say that you survived the tribulation, but you had some diabetes or you had some other issue going on, now those things are all gone, and you're given these long lifespans that we see in Isaiah. I think it's 65 or 66. That if you don't basically follow Christ, then you're only going to live to 100 years old, and you're going to be thought of as a child when you die. But those guys are going to have, or those people are going to have offspring and children that are now born into the kingdom age, and they are going to be born into these perfect physical environment, perfect mortal bodies, and almost an idyllic, paradisical kind of a world where Christ is ruling and reigning from Jerusalem. And he is not going to be, he's no longer, Jesus is not going to no longer be, I think I'm using a double negative there. He's no longer going to be some ideological or theoretical religious icon from ancient history. He's going to be somebody that they can go and see and physically look at. And there's not going to be any doubt in their mind that he's real, right? And so when you read Hebrews 11, let me read that. And it talks about what is faith. Let me get there real quick. So it says in Hebrews 11, now faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. How can you have faith in something that's not seen if you can see Jesus? So I don't understand. I mean, for me personally, this is a question I wrestle with. If they're able to see him, does that require faith still? So I don't know how that plays into this, but I think that there is something that we're missing or not understanding necessarily about how redemption goes on into the future after the second coming. And Jesus is physically there, and there's no question. He's not, there's no denying that he's real. Angels are going to be visible to people. The glorified saints, I think, will be visible to people. So the long lifespans, all of that is now in play. And I think the animal sacrifices, how that comes into play here, is not for salvation. It's not for redemption or any of those kinds of things. It's purely for a like ritual cleansings. Just like these red heifers have to be killed and burned, and their ashes have to be put in water, and then that water has to be used with the ashes in it to sanctify the instruments and the priest, etc., before the temple can become functional. I think this has something to do with ritual cleansing for them to be able to even go into the area before Christ himself, in their natural states, in their natural bodies. So for me, it's more of a kind of a ritual cleansing kind of thing, maybe similar to like a mikveh was in the Old Testament. The baptism, how they used baptism was a ritual cleansing. It wasn't a one-time thing. They did it all the time. You did it before you were of age. You did it when you got married. You could do it at different times of your life or different significant events. I think this is very similar in terms of for these natural humans that are in the kingdom age now.
So you're going
My
down.
opinion. My opinion.
So, yeah. So what seems like what you're saying is this isn't merely or only a memorial, but there's like object lesson going on here. Is that kind of where you're going with this?
Yeah, I don't think it's for. Well, I don't think it's a memorial at all.
Okay.
I don't think they're looking back on something. I don't think that they have to look back on this or use it as a memorial for something that Christ did once for all and did away with that. I think it's purely now more pragmatic. It's more of a ritual cleansing for them for these mortals to actually even come into the presence of Jesus, or to the temple area, for instance, right? To participate in particular things. Like I said earlier, in much the same way that we kill these red heifers, burn their ashes, put the ashes into water, now use that to cleanse things, in that regard. So I don't think it's a memorial at all. I simply think it's pragmatic in how they're going to use that going forward, because Christ is the one and the last and only sacrifice that matters in terms of redemption. So I don't think it has anything to do with redemption or salvation. I think it's purely pragmatic.
Okay. That is relatively interesting, because I think the majority position would be that it's just as the earlier sacrifices looked forwards to the cross, so the kingdom sacrifices would be looking back to the cross. That's probably the majority position. But
Yeah.
with your position, there is some interesting things about it that I think are thought-provoking and worth considering, and that is the ritual cleansing aspect. Because I do think that is often overlooked when people speak of the subject. Okay. Well, we are out of the official questions. I do see one more, and then I will make this the last question. This one's here in the timeline. It says, will we be able to go to and fro from between heaven and earth in the after the 1,000-year reign?
Yeah, I think in our glorified forms we'll be able to travel at the speed of thought.
Amen.
And just as First John 3 talks about that we'll be like Christ in this glorified state. We won't be God. We'll be like him in some of the powers and things he's able to do. I think we'll be able to travel at the speed of thought. I think we'll be able, if the New Jerusalem is like a satellite over the earth, hovering over the earth, traveling around the earth or whatever, providing light and so forth. Or maybe it's what do they call it?
Geosynchronous? Synchronous.
Yeah, or synchronous, where it's always kind of traveling with the earth on one spot over Jerusalem or something. We'll be able to be there. And if I think about, I want to be in Texas, I just think about it and I'm there and I'm at whatever place I want to be at. Much in the same way that Christ could appear and disappear at will. He could walk through walls. He could sit down in a chair right after you walk through a wall, eat food or eat fish and do whatever. You know what I mean? So I don't think we're going to be traveling for us is going to be any kind of limitation at all.
Amen. All right, brother. We'll wrap this up now, folks. Thank you for showing up. Thank my moderators. Thank you very, very much for the work that you do on the sideline, behind the scene. And we thank you for the questions that you folks offered today. Hopefully we've been an encouragement to you. I'm probably not going to have a live stream this Friday as I'm going to be on the road and at the conference, unless I just do a short live stream with Pete or somebody else that's at the conference. That might happen, but my normal Revelation study is probably not going to happen. So at any rate, we're going to wind this up here. Pete, thank you for showing up today. And I'm going to say goodbye to everybody.